The Myth and Magic of Prester John by DW Draffin. The study of history is often the study of facts. And here at the Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages, our founder, Nick Barksdale, wanted more than anything to create a place online for trustworthy academic information, soberly presented. Yet he knew history is also the study of narrative and story, and the tales we end up telling ourselves about the past become as important or even more important than the facts themselves. One of the most important and influential stories that our medieval ancestors from the Near East and Europe told was the patently fantastical legend of a great emperor who lived somewhere beyond the horizon. He was the mightiest of all Christian kings. His lands were paradises and utopias, and yet he was beset on all sides by savages and heathens. His name was Prester John, and he was a beacon of hope and piety and fantasy for centuries. It is likely that the early oral tales of Prester John were the combinations of yet earlier tales and rumors. His is a narrative tradition begun by the interaction of early Christians with the Far East, beginning perhaps with the missionary travels of the Apostle Thomas after the death of Jesus. Now considered heretical by the modern church, the Acts of Thomas describe how he went from Syria to India by sea and gained audiences with the kings he met there. Of course, the zeal of Thomas proved his downfall, as he was slain by the spearmen of an Afghan king after the apostle had converted his daughter to the new faith. Yet there are other possible origins to the legend of Prester John. Also during the 1st century, a figure is mentioned in the writings of Eusebius of Caesarea. This Presbyter John, or John the Elder, is possibly a reference to the Apostle John, or maybe John of Patmos, the likely author of the Book of Revelations. To increase his connection to the biblical story, certain legends also state that Prester John is a direct descendant of the 3 Magi, who beheld the baby Jesus in the manger before returning to their empires of the East. If it is true these stories are connected, it makes the legend of Prester John a fabulous fan fiction of the New Testament, over 1,000 years in the telling. What happens to the Magi? Do they just go back home after witnessing divinity? What do they do? How do they raise their children knowing there's a living God just over the horizon to the west? Our ancestors were just as smart and clever and creative as we are. They needed satisfying answers to these questions, as this core biblical scene would be told again and again and provide ample fodder for families sitting about a fire. They reasoned that these magi had great eastern empires unknown to the civilized West, and that they were last seen a millennia ago. Therefore, their descendant must also be a great magi, an emperor, and a devout Christian. In fact, no ruler has a better claim to proximity to the Christian God than a descendant of the Magi who brought gifts and blessed the newborn. Other stories reached these people, adding to the legend. In the 5th century, Nestorius, the Archbishop of Constantinople, set off a firestorm in Christian theological circles with his idea of a dual nature of Christ. Deemed heretical in his lifetime, the philosopher was forced to withdraw to the east and the court of the Sasanian Empire in Persia. Over the ensuing centuries, while it was rejected in the West, Nestorian Christianity flourished in the East, reaching as far as China. Rumors of these far-off lands and the strange but heroic Christians who built kingdoms there fired the imaginations of minstrels and monks, and all kinds of travel tales were popular around the hearth at night long before the 13th century Marco Polo journeyed east. And then the Crusades began, forcing into contact two very distant and disparate cultures who then spent centuries trying to make sense of where they and the others fit in the world. Also playing into this is the very powerful idea of limitless horizons and an endless Asia that can contain anything the mind can imagine. When one's worldview is dependent on the tales of merchants and pilgrims to spread knowledge of anything outside your direct locality, legends such as Prester John emerge. The first document that mentions him is a fragment in the writings of Otto of Freising in 1145, a churchman who attended the Second Crusade. He wrote in his Chronicle, or the History of the Two Cities, "We also saw there at that time, December 1145, the aforesaid Bishop of Jabala in Syria. He said indeed that not many years since, one John, a king and priest living in the Far East beyond Persia and Armenia, and who with his people is a Christian, but a Nestorian, had warred upon the so-called Samniards, the brother kings of the Medes and Persians. John also attacked Ecbatana, the capital of their kingdom. When the aforesaid kings advanced against him with a force of Persians, Medes, and Assyrians, a 3-day struggle ensued, since both sides were willing to die rather than to flee. At length, Prester John, so he is usually called, put the Persians to flight, and emerged from the dreadful slaughter as victor. The bishop said that the aforesaid John moved his army to aid the Church of Jerusalem, but that when he came to the Tigris and was unable to take his army across it by any means, he turned aside to the north, where he had been informed that the stream was frozen solid during the winter. There he awaited the ice for several years, but saw none because of the temperate weather. His army lost many men on account of the weather, to which they were unaccustomed, and he was compelled to return home. He is said to be a descendant of the Magi of old, who are mentioned in the Gospel. He governs the same people as they did, and is said to enjoy such glory and such plenty that he uses no scepter save one of emerald. Fired by the example of his forefathers, who came to adore Christ in the manger, he proposed to go to Jerusalem, but he was, they say, turned back for the aforementioned reason. And then there is the document, allegedly written by his own hand. It is said that 20 years later, Prester John himself, or one of the fantasy authors of the day, wrote an elaborate letter directly to the Roman Emperor of the East in Constantinople, Manuel I Komnenos. This letter from 1165 establishes many of the beliefs about Prester John and his faraway kingdoms that persist for several centuries more. Introducing himself as John, Christian sovereign and Lord of Lords, the letter begins with a gracious greeting. Prester John, by the power and virtue of God and our Lord Jesus Christ, Lord of Lords, to Emmanuel, governor of the Romans, wishing him health and the extended enjoyment of divine favor. It has been reported to our Majesty that you esteem our Excellency, and that mention of our High One has reached you, and we have learned through our delegate that you should wish to send us some entertainments and trifles which would satisfy our righteousness. Of course, we are only human, and take it in good faith, and through our delegate we transmit to you some things, for we wish and long to know if, as with us, you hold the true faith, and if you, through all things, believe our Lord Jesus Christ. While we know ourselves to be mortal, the little Greeks regard you as a god, while we know that you are mortal and subject to human infirmities. Because of the usual munificence of our liberality, if there is anything you should desire for your pleasure, make it known to us through our delegate, through a small note of your esteem, and you shall have it for the asking. Receive the hawkweed in our own name and use it for your own sake, because we gladly use your jar of unguent in order that we mutually strengthen and corroborate our bodily strength. And on account of art, respect and consider our gift. If you should desire to come to our kingdom, we will place you in the greatest and most dignified place in our house, and you will be able to enjoy our abundance from that which overflows with us. And if you should wish to return, you will return possessing riches. Remember your end, and you will not sin forever. If you truly wish to know the magnitude and excellence of our highness, and over what lands our power dominates, then know and believe without hesitation that I, Prester John, am Lord of Lords, and surpass in all riches which are under the heaven, in virtue and in power, all the kings of the wide world. 72 kings are tributaries to us. I am a devout Christian, and everywhere do we defend poor Christians, whom the empire of our clemency rules, and we sustain them with alms. We have vowed to visit the sepulchre of the Lord with the greatest army, just as it is befitting the glory of our majesty, in order to humble and defeat the enemies of the cross of Christ, and to exalt his blessed name. Our magnificence dominates the 3 Indias, and our land extends from farthest India, where the body of St. Thomas the Apostle rests, to the place where the sun rises, and returns by slopes to the Babylonian desert near the Tower of Babel. 72 provinces serve us, of which a few are Christian, and each one of them has its own king, who all are our tributaries. In our country are born and raised elephants, dromedaries, camels, hippopotami, crocodiles, panthers, aurochs, white and red lions, white bears, white merlins, silent cicadas, griffins, tigers, lamias, hyenas, wild oxen, archers, wild men, horned men, fawns, satyrs, and women of the same kind, pygmies, dog-headed men, giants whose height is 40 cubits, one-eyed men, cyclops, and a bird which is called the phoenix, and almost all kinds of animals that are under heaven. Our land flows with honey and abounds with milk. In a particular part of our country, no poisons harm, nor noisy frog croaks. There is no scorpion there, nor serpent creeping in the grass. Venomous animals are not able to live in that place, nor harm anyone. Amid the pagans, and through one of our provinces, flows a river which is called Idonis. This river, flowing out of paradise, extends its windings by various courses throughout the entire province, and in it are found natural gems, emeralds, sapphires, carbuncles, topazes, chrysolites, onyx, beryls, amethysts, sardonyxes, and many other precious gems. In the same place a plant grows which is called asidios, the root of which, if someone carries it upon his person, he puts to flight the unclean spirit and causes it to announce who and from where it may be, and its name. And so unclean spirits never dare to invade anyone in that land. In another province of ours, whole pepper, which is exchanged for wheat, grain, leather, and bread, grows and is gathered. That land is also woody, like a forest of willows fully permeated with serpents. But when the pepper ripens, the forest is set on fire, and the fleeing serpents enter their holes, and then the pepper from the shrubbery is dried and cooked. But how it is cooked, no stranger is permitted to know. This grove is situated at the foot of Mount Olympus, from where a clear spring issues, containing all kinds of pleasant tastes. The taste, however, varies each hour of the day and night, and flows out by a waterway for 3 days, not far from Paradise, from where Adam was expelled. If someone who has fasted for 3 days tastes of this spring, he will suffer no infirmity from that day on, and will always be as if he were 32 years old, however long he may live. There are small gems here which are called midriosi, and which eagles are often accustomed to bring to our country, by which they rejuvenate and restore their sight. If someone should wear one on his finger, his sight would not fail, and if his sight diminishes, it is restored, and the more he uses his eyes, the sharper his sight becomes. Blessed by the proper charm, it renders a man invisible, banishes hatred, forges friendship, and drives away envy. Among the other things which marvelously happen in our kingdom, there is the sandy sea without water. Indeed, the sand moves and swells up in waves just like all other seas, and is never still. This sea can be crossed neither by ship nor by any other means, and for this reason what type of land may lie beyond is not able to be known. And although it is completely devoid of water, nevertheless diverse kinds of fish are found near the shore on our side, which are the most palatable and tasty to eat, and which are seen nowhere else. 3 days' distance from this sea are some mountains, from which descends a river of stones, in the same condition as the sea, without water, and it flows through our kingdom all the way to the Sea of Sand. It flows for 3 days a week, and small and large stones flow by and carry with them pieces of woods all the way to the Sea of Sand, and after the river has entered the sea, the stones and wood vanish and do not appear again. As long as it does not flow, anyone is able to cross it. On the other 4 days it is accessible to crossing. Near the desert, between the uninhabited mountains, a certain rivulet flows beneath the earth, the entrance to which is not accessible except by chance. Indeed, sometimes the ground opens up, and if someone at that moment crosses over from there, he is able to enter, but he must quickly get out, if by any chance the ground may close up. And whatever he snatches from the sand is precious stones and gems, for the sand and gravel are nothing but precious stones and gems. And that rivulet flows into another river of greater size, which the men of our kingdom enter and carry from there the greatest abundance of precious stones, nor do they dare to sell them unless they show them first to our excellency. And if we wish to keep them in our treasury or for the payment of our army, we receive them given to us at half price. Otherwise they are able to sell them freely. The children in that land are raised in water, so that in order to find stones, they may live sometimes for 3 or 4 months entirely under water. Beyond the Stone River are the 10 tribes of the Jews, who, though they imagine they have kings of their own, are nevertheless our servants and tributaries to our excellency. In certain other provinces near the torrid zone there are serpents who in our language are called salamanders. Those serpents are only able to live in fire, and they produce a certain little membrane around them, just as other works do, which makes silk. This little membrane is carefully fashioned by the ladies of our palace, and from this we have garments and clothes for the full use of our excellency. Those clothes are washed only in a strong fire. Our serenity abounds in gold and silver and precious stones, elephants, dromedaries, camels, and dogs. Our gentle hospitality receives all travelers from abroad and pilgrims. There are no poor among us. Neither thief nor plunderer is found among us, nor does a flatterer have a place there, nor does avarice. There is no division among us. Our people abound in all kinds of wealth. We have few horses and wretched ones. We believe that no people is equal to us in riches or in number of men. When we proceed to war against our enemies, we have carried before our front line in separate wagons 13 great and very tall crosses made of gold and precious stones in place of banners, and each one of these is followed by 10,000 mounted soldiers and 100,000 foot soldiers, besides those who are assigned to the packs and the cartloads and the bringing in of the food of the army. Indeed, when we ride out unarmed, a wooden cross, ornamented with neither paint, gold, nor gems, proceeds before our Majesty, so that we may always be mindful of the passion of our Lord Jesus Christ, and so does a golden vase, full of earth, in order that we may know that our body will return to its proper origin, the earth. And another silver vase, full of gold, is carried before us in order that all may understand that we are Lord of lords. In all the riches which are in the world, our magnificence exceeds in abundance and surpasses. There is not a liar among us, nor is anyone able to lie, and if someone there should begin to lie, he immediately dies. That is, he would be considered just as a dead man among us, nor would any mention of him be made among us. That is, he would receive no further honor among us. We all follow truth, and we love one another. There is no adulterer among us. No vice rules among us. Every year we visit the body of the holy prophet Daniel with a large army in the Babylonian desert, and we are all armed on account of the wild beasts and other serpents, which are called frightful. Among us fish are caught, by whose blood purple things are dyed. We have many fortifications, and the strongest men and men of various form. We rule over the Amazons and even the Bragmanni. Indeed, the palace in which our sublimity dwells is in the image and likeness of the palace which the Apostle Thomas planned for Gondopharos, king of the Indians, and the outer buildings and other buildings are similar in all ways to that palace. The paneled ceilings, beams, and epistelia are made of acacia. The roof of the same palace is of ebony, so that by any circumstance it is not able to be burned. Indeed, at either end of the palace, above the roof ridge, are 2 golden apples, and in each of these are 2 carbuncles, so that the gold shines in the day, and the carbuncles sparkle at night. The larger gates of the palace are of sardonyx inlaid with serpent's horn, so that no one is able to enter secretly with poison. The others are of ebony, and the windows are of crystal. Some of the tables on which our court eats are of gold, and others are of amethyst, and the columns which support the tables are of ebony. Before our palace is a certain street, in which our justice is accustomed to watch those triumphant in battle. The pavement is of onyx, and the walls inlaid with onyx, so that by the power of the stone the courage of the warriors grows. In our aforementioned palace no torch burns at night except that which is fed by balsam. The chamber in which our sublimity sleeps is marvelously gilded and ornamented with all kinds of stones. If indeed wherever onyx should be used for adornment, then around it would be 4 cornelians of the same size, in order that by their virtue the irregularity of the onyx may be regulated. In the same chamber balsam always burns. Our bed is of sapphire, on account of the stone's virtue in chastity. We have the most beautiful women, but they do not come to us except 4 times a year for the purpose of procreating children, and thus sanctified by us, as Bathsheba by David, each one returns to her place. Once a day our court dines. At our table every day 30,000 eat besides those who enter and leave, and all these receive provisions each day from our treasury, such as horses and other expenses. This table is of precious emerald, and 2 columns of amethyst support it. The power of this stone allows no one sitting at the table to become inebriated. Before the doors of our palace, near the palace where the fighters struggle in battle, is a mirror of very great size, to which one climbs by 125 steps. Indeed, the steps of the lower 1/3 are of porphyry, and partly of serpentine and alabaster. From this point to the upper 1/3 the steps are of crystal stone and sardonyx. Indeed, the upper 1/3 are of amethyst, amber, jasper, and sapphire. Indeed, the mirror is supported by a single column. Above this column is set a base. Upon the base are 2 columns, above which is another base, upon which are 4 columns, above which is another base, and upon which are 8 columns, above which is another base, and upon which are 16 columns, above which is another base, upon which arc 32 columns, above which is another base, and upon which are 64 columns, above which is another base, upon which are also 64 columns, above which is another base, and upon which are 32 columns. And so in descending the columns diminish in number, just as ascending they increase in number, to 1. Moreover, the columns and the bases are of the same kinds of stones as the steps by which one ascends to them. Indeed, at the top of the uppermost column there is a mirror, consecrated by such art that all machinations and all things which happen for and against us in the adjacent provinces subject to us are most clearly seen and known by the onlookers. Moreover, it is guarded by 12,000 soldiers in the daytime, just as at night, so that it may not be by some chance or accident broken or thrown down. Every month 7 kings serve us, with each one of them in order, as well as 62 dukes, 365 counts at our table, in addition to those who are charged with various duties at our court. At our table every day 12 archbishops eat close by our side on the right, on the left eat 20 bishops, in addition to the Patriarch of St. Thomas and the Bishop of Samarkand, and the Archbishop of Susa, where the throne and the dominion of our glory reside, and the imperial palace. Every month each one of them returns, in turn, to his own home. The others never depart from our side. Indeed, abbots serve us in our chapel according to the number of days in the year, and every month they return to their own homes, and the same number of others return to the same service to our chapel every calends. We have another palace, not of greater length, but of greater height and beauty, which was built according to a vision that, before we were born, appeared to our father, who, on account of the holiness and justice which marvelously flourished in him, was called Quasi-Deus. For it was said to him in a dream, "Build a palace for your son, who is to be born of you, and who will be king of the worldly kings and lord of the lords of the entire earth. And that palace will have such a grace conferred to it by God, that there no one will ever be hungry, no one will be sick, nor will any one, being inside, die on that on which he has emerged. And if any one has the strongest hunger and is sick to the point of death, if he enters the palace and stays there for some time, he will leave satisfied, as if he might have eaten 100 courses of food, and as healthy as if he might have suffered no infirmities in his lifetime." On the next morning, Quasi-Deus, my father, terrified by the entire vision, got up, and after he had thought and was greatly disturbed, he heard a sublime voice, and which all who were with him heard pronounced, "O Quasi-Deus, do what you have been ordered to. Do not hesitate by any means, for all will be just as it has been predicted to you." By this voice, certainly, my father was completely comforted, and immediately he ordered the palace to be built, in the construction of which only precious stones and the best melted gold was used for cement. Its heaven, that is, its roof, is of the clearest sapphire, and the brightest topazes were set here and there in between them, so that the sapphires, like the purest heaven, and topazes, in the manner of stars, illuminate the palace. Indeed, the floor is of large crystal flagstones. There is no chamber or other kind of division in the palace. 50 columns of the purest gold, formed like needles, are set in the palace near the walls. In each corner is one column, the rest are set between them. The height of one column is 60 cubits. Its circumference is such that 2 men are able to encompass it with their arms, and each one has at its top a carbuncle of such size as a large amphora, by which the palace is illuminated as the world is illuminated by the sun. If you ask, why are the columns sharpened to a point just as needles, the cause is evidently this: because, if they were as wide at the top as at the bottom, the door and the whole palace would not be so greatly illuminated by the brightness of the carbuncles. And likewise, if you ask whether either of the two are bright there, so great is the brightness there that nothing can be imagined so small or so fine, if it is on the floor, that it is not able to be seen by any one. There is no window or other opening there, so that the brightness of the carbuncles and other stones cannot be eclipsed by the brightness of the most serene heaven and sun. On the day of our birth, and when we are coronated, we enter that palace and remain inside as long as we might have stayed there to have eaten, and we leave there satisfied, as if we were filled with all kinds of food. If again you ask why, since the Creator of all will have made us the most powerful and the most glorious over all mortals, why our sublimity does not permit itself to be called by a more noble name than presbyter, your prudence ought not to be surprised. For we have in our court many officials who are more deserving of title and office, as far as ecclesiastical honor is concerned, and they are provided with divine service even greater than ours. In fact, our steward is a primate and king, our cupbearer an archbishop and king, our marshal a king and archimandrite, and our chief cook a king and abbot. And on that account our Highness has not allowed himself to be called by the same names or distinguished by the same ranks, of which our court seems to be full, and therefore he chooses preferably to be called by a lesser name or inferior rank on account of his humility. We cannot at present tell you enough about our glory and power, but when you come to us, you will say that we are truly the Lord of Lords of the whole earth. In the meantime, you should know this trifling fact, that our country extends in breadth for 4 months in one direction. Indeed, in the other direction, no one knows how far our kingdom extends. If you can count the stars in heaven and the sand of the sea, then you can calculate the extent of our kingdom and our power. The reaction to this letter was quite profound. It doesn't appear that any of Emperor Manuel's contemporaries seriously doubted its veracity. He allegedly did not. A full 134 years after this letter was sent, they were still searching for Prester John and speaking of him as a factual ruler. Marco Polo returned from the court of Kublai Khan with the tale that, 100 years before, Genghis Khan himself sought the hand of Prester John's daughter. When it was refused, the great Khan made Prester John's empire one of his first victims. Friar Odoric of Pordenone, who traveled throughout the East in 1318, seeing Sumatra and China and India, echoed the legend as Marco Polo had portrayed it. The Travels of Friar Odoric, 1318. Departing from that land of Cathay and travelling westward for 50 days through many cities and towns, I arrived at the country of Prester John. But as regards him, not 1/100th part is true of what is told of him as if it were undeniable. His principal city is called Tozan, and chief city though it is, Vicenza would be reckoned its superior. He has, however, many other cities under him, and by a standing compact always receives to wife the great Khan's daughter. Travelling thence for many days, I came unto a certain province which is called Kansan, and that is the second best province in the world, and the best populated. From where it is most narrow, it hath a width of 50 days' journey, and its length is more than 60, and everywhere it has such a population that when you go forth from the gate of one city, you already see the gate of another. And it hath also great store of victuals, but above all of chestnuts. Rhubarb likewise grows in this province, and that in such abundance that you may load an ass with it for less than 6 groats. And this province is one of the 12 divisions of the empire of the great Khan. After I had left the lands of Prester John, and was travelling toward the west, I came to a certain country which is called Millestorta, a fair and very fertile region. In this country used to dwell a certain one who was called the Old Man of the Mountain. Between 2 of the mountains of that region he had built a wall, and this he carried right round one of the mountains, and inside this wall were the most delightful fountains of water, and beside them were set the most charming virgins on the face of the earth, as well as splendid horses and everything else that could be thought of for the gratification of man's senses. Wine and milk also were made to flow there by certain conduits, and the place had the name of Paradise. And when he found any youth of promise, he caused him to be admitted to his paradise. And then, when he desired to cause any king or baron to be assassinated or poignarded, he called on the officer who was set over that paradise to select some one who was most fitted for the business, and who most delighted in the life led in that paradise of his. To this young man a certain potion was given, which immediately set him fast asleep, and so in his sleep he was carried forth from that paradise. And when he awoke again, and found himself no longer in paradise, he went into such a madness of grief that he knew not what he did. And when he importuned that old one of the mountain to let him back again into paradise, the reply was, "Thither thou canst not return until thou shalt have slain such a king or baron, and then, whether thou live or die, I will bring thee back into paradise again." And so, through the youth's great lust to get back into his paradise, he got murdered by his hand whomsoever he list, and thus the fear of this old one was upon all the kings of the East, and they paid him heavy tribute. But when the Tartars had conquered nearly the whole of the East, they came also to the land of that old man, and at last took his dominion from him. And when they had done this, he sent forth many of his assassins from his paradise, and by their hands caused many Tartars to be assassinated and slain. And when the Tartars saw this, they came to the city wherein the old man dwelt, and besieged it, and quitted it not until they took it, and the old man also. Him they bound in chains, and caused to suffer a miserable death. The development of the legend can clearly be seen by the popularity of this travelogue, and the fanciful version of it written thousands of leagues distant by Sir John Mandeville, another 48 years later. In his version, the lands and cities of Prester John are the greatest in the world, and the old man in the mountain becomes the dashing young king Gathalonabes. Medieval Sourcebook, Mandeville on Prester John. This text, attributed to Sir John Mandeville, was written circa 1366, and presents a series of picturesque fables about the East. These stories fascinated Western Europeans, as did the more reliable, slightly, stories of Marco Polo. One way of understanding Western interest in the rest of the world is to see the process by which interest became research, research became knowledge, and knowledge became power. By the time Europe was able to expand in the 16th century and later, it was far better equipped to understand and, if necessary, undermine other cultures than other cultures were to understand Europe. Chapter 30. Of the royal estate of Prester John, and of a rich man that made a marvelous castle, and clept it Paradise, and of his subtlety. This emperor, Prester John, holds full great land, and hath many full noble cities and good towns in his realm, and many great diverse isles, and large, for all the country of Ind is devised in isles, for the great floods that come from Paradise, that depart all the land in many parts. And also in the sea he hath full many isles, and the best city in the isle of Pentesoir is Nyse, that is a full royal city, and a noble and full rich. This Prester John hath under him many kings and many isles, and many diverse folk of diverse conditions, and this land is full good and rich, but not so rich as is the land of the great Chan. For the merchants come not thither so commonly for to buy merchandises as they do in the land of the great Chan, for it is too far to travel to. And on that other part, in the Isle of Cathay, men find all manner thing that is needed to man, cloths of gold, of silk, of spicery, and all manner avoirdupois. And therefore, albeit that men have greater cheap in the Isle of Prester John, natheless, men dread the long way and the great perils in the sea in those parts. For in many places of the sea be great rocks of stone of the adamant, that of his proper nature draweth iron to him, and therefore there pass no ships that have either bonds or nails of iron within them, and if there do, anon the rocks of the adamants draw them to them, that never they may go thence. I myself have seen afar in that sea, as though it had been a great isle full of trees and buscale, full of thorns and briars, great plenty. And the shipmen told us that all that was of ships that were drawn thither by the adamants for the iron that was in them, and of the rottenness, and other thing that was within the ships, grew such buscale, and thorns and briars, and green grass, and such manner of thing, and of the masts and the sail yards, it seemed a great wood or a grove, and such rocks be in many places thereabout, and therefore dare not the merchants pass there, but if they know well the passages, or else that they have good loads men. And also they dread the long way, and therefore they go to Cathay, for it is more nigh. And yet it is not so nigh, but that men must be travelling by sea and land 11 months or 12 from Genoa or from Venice, or he come to Cathay. And yet is the land of Prester John more far by many dreadful journeys. And the merchants pass by the kingdom of Persia, and go to a city that is clept Hermes, for Hermes the philosopher founded it. And after that they pass an arm of the sea, and then they go to another city that is clept Golbache, and there they find merchandises, and of popinjays, as great plenty as men find here of geese. And if they will pass further, they may go sickerly enough. In that country is but little wheat or barley, and therefore they eat rice and honey, and milk and cheese and fruit. This emperor Prester John taketh away to his wife the daughter of the great Chan, and the great Chan also in the same wise the daughter of Prester John, for these two be the greatest lords under the firmament. In the land of Prester John be many diverse things, and many precious stones, so great and so large, that men make of them vessels, as platters, dishes, and cups, and many other marvels be there, that it were too cumbrous and too long to put it in scripture of books, but of the principal isles, and of his estate, and of his law, I shall tell you some part. This Emperor Prester John is Christian, and a great part of his country also. But yet they have not all the articles of our faith as we have. They believe well in the Father, in the Son, and in the Holy Ghost, and they be full devout, and right true one to another. And they set not by no barrets, ne by cautels, nor of no deceits. And he hath under him 72 provinces, and in every province is a king. And these kings have kings under them, and all be tributaries to Prester John. And he hath in his lordships many great marvels. For in his country is the sea that men clep the gravelly sea, that is all gravel and sand, without any drop of water, and it ebbeth and floweth in great waves, as other seas do, and it is never still, nay, in peace, in no manner season, and no man may pass that sea by navy, nay, by no manner of craft, and therefore may no man know what land is beyond that sea. And albeit that it have no water, yet men find therein and on the banks full good fish of other manner of kind and shape, than men find in any other sea, and they be of right good taste, and delicious to man's meat. And 3 journeys long from that sea be great mountains, out of the which goeth out a great flood that cometh out of paradise, and it is full of precious stones, without any drop of water, and it runneth through the desert on that one side, so that it maketh the sea gravelly, and it beareth into that sea, and there it endeth. And that flom runneth also 3 days in the week, and bringeth with him great stones, and the rocks also therewith, and that great plenty. And anon, as they may be entered into the gravelly sea, they be seen no more, but lost for evermore. And in those 3 days that river runneth, no man dare enter into it, but in the other days men dare enter well enough. Also beyond that flom, more upwards to the deserts, is a great plain, all gravelly, between the mountains. And in that plain, every day at the sun rising, begin to grow small trees, and they grow till midday, bearing fruit, but no man dare take of that fruit, for it is a thing of fairy. And after midday they decrease, and enter again into the earth, so that at the going down of the sun they appear no more. And so they do every day. And that is a great marvel. In that desert be many wild men that be hideous to look on, for they be horned, and they speak not, but they grunt as pigs. And there is also great plenty of wild hounds. And there be many popinjays that they clep psitakis in their language, and they speak of their proper nature, and salute men that go through the deserts, and speak to them as apertly as though it were a man. And they that speak well have a large tongue, and have 5 toes upon a foot. And there be also of another manner, that have but 3 toes upon a foot, and they speak not, or but little, for they cannot but cry. This Emperor Prester John, when he goeth into battle against any other lord, he hath no banners borne before him, but he hath 3 crosses of gold, fine, great, and high, full of precious stones. And every one of those crosses be set in a chariot, full richly arrayed. And for to keep every cross be ordained 10,000 men of arms, and more than 100,000 men on foot, in manner as men would keep a standard in our countries, when that we be in land of war. And this number of folk is without the principal host, and without wings ordained for the battle. And when he hath no war, but rideth with a privy many, then he hath borne before him but 1 cross of tree, without painting, and without gold or silver or precious stones, in remembrance that Jesu Christ suffered death upon a cross of tree. And he hath borne before him also a platter of gold full of earth, in token that his noblesse, and his might, and his flesh shall turn to earth. And he hath borne before him also a vessel of silver, full of noble jewels of gold, full rich, and of precious stones, in token of his lordship, and of his noblesse, and of his might. He dwelleth commonly in the city of Susa, and there is his principal palace, that is so rich and so noble that no man will trow it by estimation, but he had seen it. And above the chief tower of the palace be 2 round pommels of gold, and in everych of them be 2 carbuncles great and large, that shine full bright upon the night. And the principal gates of his palace be of precious stone that men clep sardonyx, and the border and the bars be of ivory, and the windows of the halls and chambers be of crystal. And the tables whereon men eat, some be of emeralds, some of amethyst, and some of gold, full of precious stones, and the pillars that bear up the tables be of the same precious stones. And the degrees to go up to his throne, where he sitteth at the meat, one is of onyx, another is of crystal, and another of jasper green, another of amethyst, another of sardine, another of cornelian, and the 7th that he setteth on his feet is of chrysolite. And all these degrees be bordered with fine gold, with the t'other precious stones, set with great pearls orient. And the sides of the siege of his throne be of emeralds, and bordered with gold full nobly, and dubbed with other precious stones and great pearls. And all the pillars in his chamber be of fine gold with precious stones, and with many carbuncles, that give great light upon the night to all people. And albeit that the carbuncles give light right enough, natheless at all times burneth a vessel of crystal full of balm, for to give good smell and odour to the emperor, and to void away all wicked airs and corruptions. And the form of his bed is of fine sapphires, bended with gold, for to make him sleep well, and to refrain him from lechery. For he will not lie with his wives, but 4 scythes in the year, after the 4 seasons, and that is only for to engender children. He hath also a full fair palace, and a noble at the city of Nyse, where that he dwelleth, when him best liketh, but the air is not so attempry as it is at the city of Susa. And ye shall understand that in all his country, nor in the countries there all about, men eat not but once in the day, as they do in the court of the great Chan, and so they eat every day in his court more than 30,000 persons, without goers and comers. But the 30,000 persons of his country, nay, of the country of the great Chan, nay, spend not so much good as do 12,000 of our country. This emperor, Prester John, hath evermore 7 kings with him to serve him, and they depart their service by certain months. And with these kings serve always 72 dukes and 360 earls. And all the days of the year there eat in his household and in his court 12 archbishops and 20 bishops. And the patriarch of St. Thomas is there, as is the Pope here. And the archbishops and the bishops and the abbots in that country be all kings. And everych of these great lords know well enough the attendance of their service. The one is master of his household, another is his chamberlain, another serveth him of a dish, another of the cup, another is steward, another is marshal, another is prince of his arms, and thus is he full nobly and royally served. And his land dureth in very breadth 4 months' journeys, and in length out of measure, that is to say, all the isles under earth that we suppose to be under us. Beside the isle of Pentesoir, that is the land of Prester John, is a great isle, long and broad, that men clep Mistorak, and it is in the lordship of Prester John. In that isle is great plenty of goods. There was dwelling, sometime, a rich man, and it is not long since, and men clept him Gathalonabes, and he was full of cautels and of subtle deceits. And he had a full fair castle, and a strong, in a mountain, so strong and so noble, that no man could devise a fairer nay stronger. After he had let mure all the mountain about with a strong wall and a fair, and within those walls he had the fairest garden that any man might behold, and therein were trees bearing all manner of fruits that any man could devise. And therein were also all manner virtuous herbs of good smell, and all other herbs also that bear fair flowers. And he had also in that garden many fair wells, and beside those wells he had let make fair halls and fair chambers, depainted all with gold and azure. And there were in that place many diverse things, and many diverse stories, and of beasts, and of birds that sung full delectably, and moved by craft, that it seemed that they were quick. And he had also in his garden all manner of fowls and of beasts that any man might think on, for to have play or sport to behold them. And he had also in that place the fairest damsels that might be found, under the age of 15 years, and the fairest young striplings that men might get of that same age. And all they were clothed in cloths of gold, full richly, and he said that those were angels. And he had also let make 3 wells, fair and noble, and all environed with stone of jasper, of crystal, diapered with gold, and set with precious stones and great orient pearls. And he had made a conduit under earth, so that the 3 wells, at his list, one should run milk, another wine, and another honey. And that place he clept Paradise. And when that any good knight that was hardy and noble came to see this royalty, he would lead him into his paradise, and show him these wonderful things to his disport, and the marvellous and delicious song of divers birds, and the fair damsels, and the fair wells of milk, of wine, and of honey, plenteously running. And he would let make divers instruments of music to sound in a high tower, so merrily that it was joy for to hear, and no man should see the craft thereof. And those he said were angels of God, and that place was Paradise, that God had behight to his friends, saying, Dabo vobis terram fluentem lacte et mele. And then would he make them to drink of certain drink, whereof anon they should be drunk, and then would them think greater delight than they had before. And then would he say to them that if they would die for him and for his love, that after their death they should come to his paradise, and they should be of the age of those demoiselles, and they should play with them, and yet be maidens. And after that yet should he put them in a fairer paradise, where that they should see God of nature visibly, in his majesty and in his bliss. And then would he shew them his intent, and say them that if they would go slay such a lord, or such a man that was his enemy, or contrarious to his list, that they should not dread to do it, and for to be slain therefore themselves. For after their death he would put them into another paradise, that was 100-fold fairer than any of the t'other, and there should they dwell with the most fairest damoiselles that might be, and play with them evermore. And thus went many diverse lusty bachelors for to slay great lords in diverse countries, that were his enemies, and made themselves to be slain, in hope to have that paradise. And thus, oftentime, he was revenged of his enemies by his subtle deceits and false cautels. And when the worthy men of the country had perceived this subtle falsehood of this Gathalanabes, they assembled them with force, and assailed his castle, and slew him, and destroyed all the fair places, and all the nobilities of that paradise. The place of the wells, and of the walls, and of many other things be yet apertly seen, but the riches is voided clean, and it is not long gone since that place was destroyed. As early as 1250, Ethiopia was mentioned as a competing location for Prester John's kingdom. Africa was as far off and exotic as East Asia, and knowing that it was a Christian kingdom surrounded by Muslims was all the evidence they needed. Missions were sent from Portugal as late as 1487 in search of Prester John, and again in 1507. For centuries, the kings of Ethiopia and their representatives were mystified why the crowns of Europe and the Pope persisted on referring to Ethiopia as the Kingdom of Prester John. By the 17th century, the study called Orientalism systematically filled in the maps, leaving no place for Prester John and his 3 Indies to be, and thus the legend finally faded away, a good 500 years after it was first recorded. What had been basically a culturally valuable Christian pop legend that allowed for a world where a Christian kingdom was doing everything right, where everyone was pious, and the rulers were kind, and there was food and plenty for all, gave people the belief that a theological utopia was possible here on earth. but it faded, relegating such hope among believers to the afterlife and more abstract expressions of divinity. Personally, I love the invented lands of Prester John. Like a painting by Bosch or Bruegel, we are offered glimpses into the minds of our medieval forebears. What was considered divine? What was monstrous? What was valuable? What was sacred? To further explore these worlds, I've designed a role-playing game set in the lands of Prester John. And I'm starting a podcast with 4 amazingly accomplished and talented actors. They will play my game, and we will explore a very silly and lighthearted version of the 3 Indies. You see, the entire game is set in the worst corner of the beautiful city of Nyse. It is the least gate, manned by the worst guards in the city, the least watch. They are in charge of who enters and leaves the fair city, and we hear the stories of the pilgrims and bandits and common people of the city as the guards interrogate them. If that sounds at all interesting to you lovers of history and legend, please follow the links below to our new Kickstarter and Patreon, and wish us luck.